Okay, so there's this moment every artist, every entrepreneur, every city is eventually going to face. And that's the moment where the thing that made you famous either fades away, as Victoria Beckham says, or at least feels like the thing that's holding you back.
Performing was my dream. The Spice Girls made me accept who I am. And then all of a sudden, it stopped.
You're going to reach this point where your own success, it's this costume, you can't take it off. And so that's where you have to start the real work of reinvention. It's the same crossroad that BABYMETAL found when they fused the two worlds that were never supposed to meet. They're reinventing J-pop and reinventing heavy metal. They created something entirely new. It's something we personally have had to do. Take my identity as the economic development director in Miami Beach and capitalize on what that meant and all the skills and all the tools and relationships that came from that. But it also required reinvention to make all of that experience relevant to places that were not Miami Beach. Because Miami Beach, that experience of South Beach seems so out of reach for a lot of the smaller communities now that we work so well with. It's a place BLACKPINK lives, balancing precision and chaos and art, machinery, authenticity, control. We're going to talk about that in the next episode. And more than anybody, it's where Victoria Beckham was when she finished being Posh Spice. And so this is the Music Cities podcast. We're going to be talking more about the documentary series about her, but it fits because it is coming out of that music world and out of that music identity. And it is music that where we first created our awareness of Victoria Beckham, Posh Spice.
People thought she was a pop star. She's married to a footballer. Who does she think she is?
It's about her fashion time, but it's not about fashion. It's really about control of your own destiny. And what happens when somebody who's been treated like a product becomes the producer? That sits at the heart of what the Music Cities podcast is about. At the Business Flair approach, it's what we talked about in the last episode when we talked about the musician money problem, taking control of your own destiny. Don't think you're in control, but you're still really just an employee of the streaming platforms. Take control, be an entrepreneur, be a startup founder. Musicians, founders, entrepreneurs, startups, even cities, eventually you're going to find and you're going to have to decide whether or not your brand is going to keep you trapped or let you fly and succeed.
It's taken so long to get to this point. I'm not going to let it slip through my fingers again.
For Victoria Beckham, this transformation began just when she admitted, and she says it in the documentary, that she no longer loved doing what everyone else had seen her, had gotten to know her doing. Everyone else maybe assumed this was her dream, being, reaching that level that the Spice Girls reached. They were global and they were famous around the world, absolute fame. They had this persona that was engaging and that a lot of people connected to, but she outgrew it. She wasn't out of the spotlight, clearly, but she walked away from that world and went to really start over on what she really felt passion for, and to do it really on her own terms rather than the terms of a pop producer, a record company, whoever else was in control up to that time, who really she was just working for. She's one of the most recognizable women in the world. And she's standing in front of a mirror. She's draped in fabric herself because she can't even afford to hire a model to do the fitting of the clothes that she wants to design. And she's trying to take this idea and make it tangible. It's what we all do as founders, as entrepreneurs, as musicians or other artists. We've got an idea, we've got an innovation, we've got something that maybe nobody's ever seen before, and we want to bring it forward, and hopefully it resonates with the public. And so get rid of the glamour, get rid of the entertainment, get rid of the married to a world famous soccer star, and It's not dramatic. It's not made for cinema. You're in a quiet room. In her case, she's got bad lighting. Maybe we have bad sound, or whatever it is. You've got all these little decisions that are just eating away at your gut, and you've just got this belief. You're just stubborn about it, and you're gonna build something better. You're gonna build it right. You're gonna build it your way, and hopefully people will respond to it. And the press, when this happened with her, the press didn't take her seriously. I think a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs encounter this. I think musicians to a certain point, but there is a different sort of freedom built into, I think, the music side. Even if you can't break out into that success piece, musicians and artists are more there to just do what they want, and I don't think there's a take them serious or not as much as is it market responsive. But in this case, it's almost you hear imposter syndrome come up out of her when you watch the documentary. She doesn't use that word, but no one took her seriously, and why would they? And I guess the imposter syndrome was valid. In her eyes, she was just a Spice Girl, and not probably not the most talented of them all. And she's trying to get into this world of high fashion and people with these pedigrees who've been doing this for a long time and have the right training and education and all of that. And so she had to deal with vicious headlines, that she's just plain fashion designer. It's a hobby, and there's just this disbelief there. But she didn't really engage with all of that.
Fashion was this creative outlet.
A lot of people didn't take it seriously.
Everybody's warning her, you will not be accepted.
She didn't argue back. She didn't go and tweet or pump her chest up. Really, any just interviews. She just kept working at it and working and working. And so every day she was refining her craft, learning it, studying what she needed to do, finding her mistakes and trying to correct each of her mistakes that she could see in there. And you can feel that when you watch those clips, those early clips of hers that are in the documentary, you can see the tension and you can see that detail. And all of a sudden, this is not a celebrity, no matter how famous she is at the time even. This is just another entrepreneur in their workspace, toiling away, trying to figure out how to make something happen, how to make something work on her own terms. And that's all we do. And it's all we hope to do as entrepreneurs, and all we hope to do as musicians. And that's what grabbed me. And I thought this is a good episode. And it's a good continuation of some of the themes we've talked about in the podcast. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't, hey, hi me out there. She was really there's no element of celebrity in what she's trying to do now, even though she is a celebrity. She's doing something for herself. She's doing what she wants to do. Yeah, it was exhausting. It needed a lot of patience. It needed a lot of attention to detail. It needed so much discipline. And remember, she's not doing this for the critics. Go back to our first episode, the very first episode we did here, Creating for Yourselves. We started with the Rick Rubin talking about doing that, and the approach that we took here, the approach we take with Business First, the approach that everyone who's an innovator or a creator, has a dream, has an idea, needs to do. Create it, do it for yourselves, not the critics, not the audience, not the customers. Create that authenticity, and that's what's going to resonate with the broader community once you're ready to go there. Let that excellence speak for itself. Let excellence speak for you. Everyone's going to be criticizing, everyone's going to be critiquing, and they're going to be saying you don't have credibility. They're not going to be looking for it anymore, and all of a sudden it's going to be there. So her first collection, 10 dresses, she did a show, I think it was like in a hotel suite. It wasn't a runway show. It wasn't paparazzi and cameras. It was just the clothes. She invited the journalists, and journalists took their notes, and she's wondering, did anybody like what they saw? And then a Madonna appeared in one of her dresses in W magazine. And so after some slow reviews, the conversation started changing. So now the industry that had mocked her, they started leaning forward a little bit, still pause, still not really believing, But she didn't jump on that bandwagon. She didn't jump on that as a celebrity and, okay, now they're paying attention to me. She just went right back to work because it wasn't there yet what she wanted to do. If you believe you know, don't believe the applause, because you've still got so much to improve. The applause is fake. The applause is fleeting. The applause at that point is people looking to be part of a story that they're not part of. Maybe even more than that, wanting a piece of a story or a potential story of a potential success that they haven't been a part of and don't deserve a piece of. But then for a few years, it worked. She grew her brand and she did bigger and bigger shows and she started getting some confidence. But then, as entrepreneurs know, as musicians know, if you're toiling away in bars for, playing for beer money, as an entrepreneur, you go through these, it's gut wrenching. It's just this, you've got to have so much intestinal fortitude, the ups and downs. And no matter how successful you are, you're sitting there obsessed with looking at your cash flow charts. And everyone from the outside sees this success and they see these things happening.
We were millions in the red.
It made me panic. Is this what you felt like when you came to watch me play football?
If we don't have the music, I'm just going to have to sing.
And all you see is bank accounts going from $200 to $100 to $50,000 to $10 to $500. And that the potential is there. The revenue is going to be there, but it's just this back and forth. And when your creativity starts taking over and really starts running, and you're in now they call it flow state. It was called you're in the zone. It can get ahead of that cash flow, and all of a sudden the money starts running thin. The logistics get challenging. Beckham starts getting nervous, and she's just worn herself out. And all of a sudden, you have so many ideas, and this is a challenge as an entrepreneur. You have these ideas, and you want to run with them, and you want to do it, and it makes sense to you, and you do it. But all of a sudden, you've been building, and you've been growing, and you've got this discipline, and this chaos starts coming in. And you do start spreading yourself too thin because everything makes sense, all these other ideas, and you have to pull back. It happens to us all the time here at Businessware. I mean, here's another idea, restarting the podcast, just a perfect example. So you have to make sure that you bring the discipline back into this, and you're not drifting off into chaos. So one of the purposes here, how does this apply to your city? That's the reason we do this. We do this we're not here to tell a Victoria Beckham story. We're here to say, what does this mean for entrepreneurs? What does this mean for economic development? What can we learn from this for cities? Well, so here's the metaphor for your city. Every city, you have a version of this. Maybe you've got a polished downtown. Okay, not every city has a polished downtown. A lot of them ignore their downtowns. But say you're a city and you've got a polished downtown, but you've got crumbling finances. Your branding campaign is working and it's out there and people see things, but it's hiding these structural cracks that are underneath. So from the outside, it all looks perfect, but inside, it's barely being held together. When an investor finally digs in, thinking about your downtown, and he looks at the books and he looks at what's happening down there, he calls them a disaster. Well, that's what happens to her. An investor finally opened her books and he said, it's a disaster. You have to rebuild this entire operation and you have to do it from scratch. You have too many staff. You have too many layers. You have too much waste. Most people will fire the messenger. Cities will do that. When you come in and start pointing out flaws, whether as a city manager, as an economic development director or staff, or as a consultant, most cities don't want to hear it. Most cities, they may not necessarily fire you. In some cases they will, but they're just going to nod and move on, especially if you're a consultant. They're going to let you do the plan. They're going to put the plan on the shelf to be a dust collector, and they're not going to move forward with it because they don't want to hear that, because they're seeing from the outside and they're believing their own press. But in this case, she listened. And we have worked with cities who absolutely have listened to us. And that's what's made the entire difference, is they trusted us, but more importantly, they had the will to move forward and hear the hard truths and do the things that needed to be done. So she cut that excess and she killed the budgets. I don't remember exactly what it was, but some of the things, the plants, the fresh plants, what they were spending for fresh plants in the office was insane. I don't know, $70,000, $90,000 a year. I don't remember exactly, but she killed all those vanity things, and she started over. Very humbling. Um, it's humbling because you had this success, and all of a sudden you realize that maybe other people are seeing that again. You don't know what you were doing. That imposter syndrome creeps up again, and you have to admit that you started getting sloppy. It's happened to us. There's a lot of different reasons that this can happen to you. And you have to do that reset. And you have to have faith in your team that you've built around you. Because that's what's driving it. And really trust those who are core to what you're building, because you didn't build it by yourself. Reinstill that discipline. And she did that, to her credit. It's a key trait of entrepreneurs, and it's a key trait for musicians and other artists to really maybe learn from, is to take those hard looks, to trust people who you do trust. They're trying to get you back on track. They're not trying to tell you what to do. They're not trying to tell you to create this instead of what you're creating. They're telling you what you have to do to be able to keep doing this, because there's other things you don't know, and they don't know what this is, and they can't tell you how to do it, but they can tell you how to do a lot of other things that are going to help you be successful with it. But then, as part of her reclaiming control, one of the things they talk about, and one of the reasons she became a joke, was she had done this Marc Jacobs ad and this series of photos. The intent of what they were is not how they were received, and they were received negatively. They were received in that Spice Girls context and in that wannabe, and she doesn't belong. And it really, she was just a joke. But she called the photographer who did that campaign for Marc Jacobs, Jürgen Teller. And she said, let's recreate the photo. But this time the picture was the same in terms of what they recreated, but she wasn't the joke anymore. The meaning of it had completely changed. And so this woman who's been framed as this sort of prop and no substance to it and just out there pretending, she's the one directing it now. She's the one directing the frame of what that photo and that message is. And it's narrative control. It's a masterclass. And it's a very simple story. If you don't own your story, someone else is going to sell it back to you. This is so important because for cities, this is one of the other key lessons out of here, because your place brand, your story, your place brand, that's never fully in your control. Much less in control than in this case with Victoria Beckham, Posh Spice. A criminal one day might have more control that day of your story, of your place brand, than you do. So finding those opportunities for consistency and discipline and being in control of your story becomes so important, because it can be so fleeting for you. And from that moment, you could see the difference in her work. And for your cities, once you reset and realize that this is deeper than a story that a communications director or a PIO comes up with. There's a lot of depth that has to come into this for it to work in a city. It's not a press release. It's different skill sets that have to dig and be part of this in a way that entrepreneurs do it. So if you're going to look for best practices, which we're sort of iffy on, you shouldn't be looking for best practices of what cities do. You should be looking at best practices of what brands do. I know in Miami Beach, when we thought about South Beach, even before that, with the South Beach Marketing Council, we're not looking at what other cities are doing. We're looking at what places like Disney are doing, who create this great place that people want to be. Look there, or else someone else is selling your story. You see it all the time, and you know who it is in your city that's selling your story, and they're selling it better than you, or they're selling it louder than you. But anyway, you could see that difference with her, and there was it It was more intentional when she was doing her shows. There was more focus of the brand. She wasn't trying to chase credibility anymore. That imposter syndrome, you can see the evolution of her dealing with imposter syndrome throughout the 3 episodes of the documentary. She didn't need to chase credibility anymore. Did she have that credibility? Maybe, maybe not, but she didn't care. That's a founder mentality. That outside credibility is outside of your control. But she had built it, and she was staying meticulous. There's a moment when she finds out in the documentary, because they'd always sent an invitation to Anna Wintour, and she never came. And all of a sudden, she comes to one of the shows, and you can see that moment where, okay, she's a real credible force in this industry.
Who does she think she is? I have been preparing for the biggest fashion show I have ever done.
Now, every fabric and silhouette and angle, everything had its purpose for what she was creating, not for herself or even the audience. So that excellence became the loudest statement that she could make. And you see something when she's backstage, and think about this for the city. Think about what it is like outside the commission chambers or outside of a meeting or in hanging out around the city manager's office in the common space between the offices there. You watch her backstage and it's not chaotic. It's not screaming. She's not a diva. She's very focused as the person in control of this. Is that the environment you have in your city, in your commission offices, behind the scenes, when things are going good or when things are going bad, when things might be going off the rails or about to go off the rails because there's just one little mistake or one little thing out of place? But she's just there and she's addressing it, and she's with the model. She's fixing, adjust a little sleeve, look at the hemlines, and she's very calm, asking questions. You can see that there's things not going right, and there's a woman apologizing for a couple of things, but she's quiet and in control. Watch musicians. How are they before they go on stage? And mayors before they walk in for a vote that could change their city for good or bad. That's when preparation, that's when fear can come in. That's when purpose comes, and they either come into control or they come into chaos. We see post after post after post of city council meetings that are so far away from this concept of discipline and control and even just respect, even when things go bad.
You know what? I have not tied your hands. I have executed what the charter says I'm entitled to, and that pisses you all off.
And she once said that if she has a bad show, it could mean the end of the brand. She could lose everything. That's not melodrama. That's the reality of building and controlling a brand. You as cities, you understand this as well as anybody. For different people, for different approaches, for different credibility levels, you have different levels of forgiveness that you can find. But you have to assume that it's not going to be there. One mistake can undo years of progress. One shooting. That's just random, but it might not matter. It can just undo everything, and you have to start over, it feels like. So having that discipline, that focus, preparation, accountability, that all merges in to help you get through those periods. And again, take that approach of that creator, of that innovator, of that brand protector. Your brand is everything, and you have to protect it. That's what's going to keep your work sharp and keep you on the ball. So she used it. She didn't just survive through all of that. She got her company stabilized. She got her beauty line launched. She rebuilt, her confidence was coming back. She was dealing with that imposter syndrome, if that's what it was. Everything throughout there looks like that's what it was. And she got respect from an industry that had been mocking her just a few years earlier. And she found her voice. When she talks now, she's not Posh Spice, this front woman. Performer. It's her. It's what she was meant to do. It's that place. It's that place that we as entrepreneurs feel. It's that place we as entrepreneurs feel that calling to do this. It's the same thing that some of you public administrators or economic developers feel. You feel called. You're doing this for a certain reason or certain reasons. You've been called in to do public service. You know, elected officials, especially at the beginning, you know, you've been called to do this, to lead, to help your community. Try and stay focused on that, because that reset she had to do, think about it. Politicians need to do that reset. I mean, we see so many politicians that start off at the right place, that come up as activists and different things, and they get on the council, and then they become mayor, and then they go to the state and they forget what it was like to run a city. And then eventually they get into leadership at the state and they start attacking cities and trying to kill everything that happens at the local level, not, you know, believing their own press that it's just their state tax policy, which is why people in entrepreneurs and businesses want to come to Florida, which it's not. It's because cities and neighborhoods, because we have created these awesome places that people want to be. Those people, those politicians really need the reset, and don't even start with Congress and the ones that get to DC. They lose everything here, but they're not creators. They're not innovators. They're not entrepreneurs. You know, they're living off of they're part of a system that doesn't produce anything any longer. And the longer you're in that system and those bureaucracies, the further you get away from being able to have that reset that Victoria Beckham had. So her story, it's a great example of how authenticity and structure, they have to coexist. You know, passion without process is going to burn you out. Process without that authenticity, it's just going to dry up. And that's how you stay a punchline. Every creative economy, whether it's a tech startup, a record label, or even a city, a downtown, you've got to find that balance. And for musicians, her journey is a reminder, it's that fame is not ownership, it's control. It's control over your masters and your message and your time of your story. For entrepreneurs, it proves reinvention is not marketing. Reinvention is management. Management of everything, not just brand, but of everything. It's unglamorous, and it's rebuilding all of the systems that no one sees. So for cities, that's what you have to do. You're so focused on how people see you, and on your ribbon cuttings, and on your shiny new things that you like to build and spend money on. But this is cautionary for you and a challenge, because you can't rebrand your way to credibility. You've got to execute. You've got to use that everyday precision and do what you say you're about doing, and be who you say you're going to be. Now, at the end of the documentary, there's a moment when she smiles, and I think she got a lot of criticism over the years that she didn't smile enough, and she's a little self-deprecating about that a couple of times in the documentary. But she smiles, and it's real. It's not forced. It's not guarded. It's not that red carpet smile. And I think that's what they were, the criticism she could, and that's the criticism she would get. But you can see on her face, you see that founder, you see that entrepreneur, that entrepreneurial light bulb in there, that what's next. And you get sense, you know, she's, and there's a moment where sort of David Beckham sort of mini interviews her at the very end. You've succeeded, you've made it. No, she's got more. She's got more to do. And so it's this state of perpetual iteration. You're always refining, always evolving, always protecting what makes the work yours. It's we constantly think about this here at Business Flair. You and cities have got to be thinking about that way. Again, protecting your story, refining your story, evolving, and protecting what's yours and who you are. And so this is not about story. And so this is not about fashion. This is not about even success. It's about mastery, rebuilding without apology, evolving without losing yourself. I think that's probably the best one. And hold control not as fear, as a fear reaction, but as freedom you experience. But evolving without losing yourself. I think that's one of the important things, because we do talk a lot about creating for yourselves. It doesn't mean that you don't rely on your team. It doesn't mean that you don't rely on those close confidants and those people who know what they're talking about. As long as and recognizing that they're not out to change who you are, and they're not out to change what you're trying to create. They're trying to help you stay authentic to that and move it forward. So with that, it's I guess it's for a corny name, call it the Posh Principle. But it's the same. It's the principle that should be driving your cities. It's the principle that drives entrepreneurs and musicians, everybody that we work with, everybody that we work together here in Business Flair. You build, you break, you rebuild, you learn, you test, you try, and over time, the magic is not in the applause; it's in the accomplishments you get from doing the work. So with that, thanks for listening. Let's do it. See ya.